Welcome to the first edition of the Paranormal Roundtable from Pursuit of the Paranormal.
And ParaMike.
ParaMike, it went completely out.
Fucking hell, man.
It's there on the screen, and I still couldn't see it.
It is. It's actually there on the screen. Wow. So this is actually quite kept together compared to the last few minutes. So welcome along, Mike. Mike will be joining us regularly on these paranormal roundtables, and we'll be joined by other people as and when in future episodes. And we aim to put these out probably monthly.
Yeah.
I also am an admin on another group page on Facebook, and it's called Paranormal Talk United. And we will be joined by Jodie, who's the other admin. She couldn't come on this first one, and she'll be regretting saying that she was going to join us. So hopefully she'll be on the next one. But we'll get a whole host. We do a UFO roundtable one, so it'll be a similar vein to that. But because the content isn't as fast moving in the paranormal world as it is in the UFO world, especially at the moment, with congressional hearings and all that kind of jazz, we thought we would take a particular topic each roundtable, and then maybe talk about specific cases and things like that as we go along, and it will sort of morph into what it will be over the coming episodes. So we're going to talk about poltergeists on this episode, and also a paranormal case. So for people who haven't listened to our podcast before, welcome along. And we're going to talk about the Enfield poltergeist a little bit later on, which some of you will or won't know. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So welcome along, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Thank you for inviting me back, and on a monthly basis, no doubt, you maniacs. Looking forward to it. I mean, I can talk the hind legs off a donkey, but looking forward to talking about the paranormal more and more frequently with you guys, and actually digging a bit deeper into things, I guess.
Yeah, because you write articles for the website for us. Mm-hmm. Now, I do need to ask now, Mike, based on what you were telling me yesterday and what you messaged me yesterday, are these articles written by you, or are they written by ChatGPT?
I mean, you could probably tell by the spelling that they're written by me and the grammatical errors, because I'm actually dyslexic, Greg, which is quite insensitive of you. I am, yes. But anyway, no. ChatGPT is a new thing, and what I sent you was just a test. Not to go on the subject of Poltergeist, but ChatGPT is fucking mental, and the stuff it can do is insane. And you should all
I've only learned about it today.
You should
after you told me about it yesterday. Do you know about ChatGPT?
GPT.
I know about LGBT, joke. I've heard of it. I know it's like basically it's like AI art, like cafe
AI,
where you just
AI
like that.
Chat. It's the same people that do that DALL-E and OpenAI, but people are using it to write their dissertations, and it's getting through law degrees with a pass.
Yeah, I'm gonna potentially bore the arse off you now. When I was testing it, and I'm sorry this isn't about the paranormal, but when I was testing I basically went, can you give me a 7-day workout plan? And within seconds it went, here's a 7-day workout plan for your full body. And I went, cool. Now can you give me a gluten-free diet plan to complement this? And within seconds it went, yep, here's your gluten-free diet plan for 7 days. And then I was like, cool, can you put that in a shopping list for me? Yep, bang, straight in a shopping list within seconds. And it's just insane. Like, I've been applying it to stuff from my work, and it's been able to get me, like, if I say, like, can you set me up a network for 10 people? It'll go, yeah, here's all the items you need. Here's the SKUs, or part numbers for all of them. Here's the prices in Great British pounds. And then you'd be like, oh, can you give that to me in USD as well? Yeah, here you go. It's honestly insane. Like, and I've only just adopted it, and scratch the surface, but the stuff it can do is mental. It's definitely gonna like revolutionize the world.
Wow.
So future articles might be written by AI.
I assure you they
churning
will.
them out.
Yeah, like it crossed my mind. I was like, I've not written one in a while. Maybe I could sneak one. And then I was like, it seems really shitty for me to just go, here you go, here's 5 articles, Greg, that I wrote in 30 seconds.
Nanoseconds.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But you did do something. It was a paranormal one you did do to show me yesterday.
Ironically, I said, give me 10 interview questions for someone who's had a poltergeist haunting. And again, with seconds, it just went, yeah, here you go, here's 10 questions that were all actually relevant. And I think...
Have you got them there?
I might have. Give me 2 seconds. Entertain the crowds while I get our chat up.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to play with that later. I play on Night Cafe so quite a bit. Obviously, we just use the prompts to create art or whatever. But
Night Cafe is brilliant.
Articles, that's mad.
Night Cafe is good. I enjoy using that.
Most thing I do on it is click the daily login to get the 5 free credits. Emails every day.
I'm at about 100 odd free credits at the moment.
So my prompt was, give me some interview questions for someone who's lived in a house with a poltergeist. The first question that came back, can you describe the events that occurred in your home that led you to believe it was haunted by a poltergeist? Number 2, how long did the activity last? Number 3, did you notice any patterns or triggers for the activity? And again, this is in seconds that it's spit this out. It's insane. But we should probably actually talk about poltergeist now rather than just technology.
Yeah. But if it can come up with questions like that, it might actually be able to come up with more realistic and sort of relevant questions. Pepsi Max?
Lemonade this time, actually.
It might come up with some more relevant questions to ask on paranormal investigations that people probably haven't thought of before. So
absolutely,
that's your task for the next episode, is to come up with some AI questions.
Yes, please. The one of the scary things about it is I've seen people go, can you write me code to do XYZ? And it will just write you like web-based code for it. Or you can plug code in and say like, what's wrong with this? And it will find the error, fix it, and tell you what the error is. Again, in seconds. You just like copy paste. Yeah, fix this.
I think I just went to have a go, and I think I'm on the wrong thing. I don't think I'm on the right program.
It's very hard to get into because their servers are so busy.
Everybody in the world's trying to get on it at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I put in, can you tell me the most famous poltergeist case? And it put, yes, I remember reading about it. A woman who was haunted by a poltergeist. She went to see a priest and he exorcised her. Then she started seeing the ghost of an old man in black. And that was it.
Nice.
It's
I don't think I'm on the right thing, to be honest.
It's a funny one because where it's AI, some stuff that comes back can be very wrong. And then you can look at it and immediately go, well, that's very wrong. But the more people feed into it, the more it will learn what's actually wrong and what's correct. So, again, as I say, it's going to revolutionize the world because this is like ground zero, essentially, and it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, or worse for humans.
Yeah.
It's like them capture things on websites, and it's like tick all boxes with traffic lights on. There's no actual right answer. It's just, it goes off what most people choose. Whether you pass or not, no one actually says these are the right squares.
When you hit submit, all it does is check your browser history, your recent browser history, to see if it's something that a human would actually naturally browse for, or if it's a bot where the browser history will be fucking all over the shop, right?
Oh,
that's all it does.
Yeah, learning.
So we've gone down a technology route.
Ironically, because I've just plumbed it in after Ash said about it, the most famous poltergeist case is probably the Enfield poltergeist case, which occurred in the late 1970s.
Wow.
Topical.
So, okay, so shall we start with poltergeist then?
Absolutely.
And definitely technology's got a part to play in the future of paranormal investigations. But
you've got me thinking that I want to try and use it now on investigations. I don't know how, but
absolutely. I think that's a new project for that, for definite.
Yeah.
So poltergeists are almost one of the main things that got me into paranormal and UFOs and everything like that when I was younger. So I used to watch a program called Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Mysteries. So if you listen to the podcast, I've spoken about it many times. And there was one particular episode where it talked about poltergeist activity, and people were having stones thrown at their windows, like small stones hitting their windows from outside the house, which is weird in itself. And it used to freak me the hell out. And I've had some paranormal experiences after that, but poltergeists have always been one of the ones that have fascinated me, because it's probably the most terrifying version of a ghost
They're like
that you can get.
they're like the holy grail of the paranormal, right? Because you're right. I mean, I've got my own theories, and I don't necessarily believe that they are ghosts as such. But they're so far removed from, if you can have a mundane haunting, what seems to happen on a mundane haunting of like hearing people talk or a device setting off. If you've got something that is unseen, and from the reports we've heard, can throw things and make things levitate and do all manner of mad shit. As I say, it is like the holy grail of the paranormal, essentially, and I think that's why it's so fascinating, because there's nothing else like it, really.
Yeah, and I think because it seems to start quite mundane, just with the banging of a wall or a pipe or something in the house that people experience, just some noises randomly, and then towards the end it sort of ramps up to the point where it's becoming dangerous to humans in
Yeah,
terms of there's physical harm happening, and this manifestation just becomes like, goes to a full apex of like danger, and then
yeah,
drops off,
and then just
which is weird.
immediately stops. And what you tend to happen is sort of a bounce effect, where that will happen. It will start quite mundane, ramp up quickly, then drop off. But then what normally happens is, after a period of time, it comes back and it's normally even worse. And we see this in so many poltergeist cases. That's like the same pattern that happens, which again is weird, right? Because if it's something supernatural, why is it bound to pattern, and why is it bound to the same sort of behavior? Now, they're not all identical, but you can start to sort of categorize things that happen across different poltergeist hauntings, as you say, like rappings and knockings on walls and closing doors. And one of the ones that a lot of people have spoken about is, if I was to say to you, like, the Grey Lady, what do you think of when I say the Grey Lady?
I think we had like a old building that it was like the Grey Lady was in this old building. I think a lot of places have a very similar
But
sort of
when I
story.
say the Grey Lady, what do you envision in your mind? What is a Grey Lady to you?
Like a ghost of a woman in like a long dress.
So
Type.
that's what I thought for ages, and then it wasn't until Keith Linder, who's an ex-guest of the show, and I've heard this another couple of times, actually explained it, and I put two and two together, that it's not necessarily like the ghost of a lady in a long grey dress. The way they describe a grey lady is as if it's a human being, but they're black and white, like a black and white TV sort of thing. And it's this weird, like, I don't know why it just gets referred to as a grey lady. But seeing like black and white apparitions is something that's seemingly happened in quite a number of poltergeist cases as well. Small tangent, but again, I was like, same as Ash, assumed the Grey Lady was like someone in, or a woman in a grey dress or something.
But she's actually like in monochrome.
Yeah, like an apparition of someone who's essentially grayscale, which is a weird way of thinking about it. And again, as I say, like, there's numerous reports of poltergeist cases of that happening. I think generally speaking, they don't necessarily attack people. They'll normally just try and do things to strike fear in people. But then the one that goes against that, which you're reading at the moment, Greg, and not to spoil it for you, is the South Shields poltergeist, where it did start to get physically abusive towards one of the members of the family. But generally speaking, that's not something that you hear of very often.
And with the poltergeist cases, they generally, now this is where we might fall out, it generally appears to centre around one person in the family. Generally, from the ones that I've looked at. Again, Keith Linder's seems to be quite the Bothell Hell House.
His is the
seems
outlier,
to be
right?
slightly, yeah, his is the outlier. But it tends to be a prepubescent girl that seems to be going through sort of changes in her body, and the sort of emotional change that's going on and the effect that has on the family seems to manifest itself in the beginnings of a poltergeist haunting. Now that's just my take on it based on what who we've spoken to over the last couple of years. But
I would agree with you. I wouldn't they're definitely. I say definitely. No one knows for definite, but they certainly seem to be person centric rather than place centric, and you can see that by the way that people who have poltergeist infestations will move house and it will follow them essentially. It does seem to tie in with a lot of, as you say, prepubescent girls, which I think is more due to a state of sort and heightened emotion. But as I say, with like Keith Linder and the South Shields poltergeist, there isn't that element of a prepubescent girl in it. But I think like maybe they are just a little bit more prone to the heightened emotions which are associated with poltergeists. So I don't think it's always prepubescent girls. But I agree with you, everything else you've said. There's also a theory about something, and I can't remember what it is actually called, but the acronym for it is RSPK. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. Random spontaneous psychokinesis or something, which is the idea that poltergeists are manifested from people's emotions, but they're unaware that they're doing it, like a sort of subconscious manifestation. And that's very interesting to explore as well. But I know Keith Linder is very against RSPK because he's like, myself and my girlfriend at the time weren't massively over our heads. They had just bought the house, which is pretty stressful. But from everything he says, he kind of, again, he's the outlier. He kind of goes against the stereotypical ingredients for a poltergeist infestation.
So one thing that I have heard as part of my paranormal investigations into the poltergeists is, you know, the knock, where they call it the rapping on the wall, where they're knocking. They've done a sound recording of a knocking sound, and when they play the waveform of that, it's actually not an instant knock. It's sort of like almost like a reverse knock. The waveform is almost reversed, but it sounds like it's going the right way. So it's almost like a whoop, whoop,
It's
whoop.
either that, or I've seen this as well with when people will capture wrappings or waveforms or something. They'll analyze the waveform, and there will be something you can audibly hear, like a knock or something, but it doesn't show up in the waveform. And unfortunately, Keith's name is going to get mentioned a lot in this because his book was the first I read about poltergeist, and he does a very good job of explaining it in his third book that he wrote about how quantum physics can actually explain some of the things that happen with poltergeists. And I think he's a big believer that they are multidimensional. So say, for instance, if you have and don't quote me on this because I could be very wrong, but if you have a sound that emanates from the fourth dimension that we can't be exposed to because we're three-dimensional beings, potentially we can hear it, but that's why it doesn't show up in our waveforms or something. And he definitely uses the fourth dimension to sort of explain how items can sort of apport from one place to another immediately. And not to get too scientific and technical, but if you're a fourth dimensional being, you can essentially reach down into the third dimension, grab something, pull it up into the fourth dimension, and whatever's in the third dimension is invisible to anymore, it doesn't exist anymore, move it somewhere else and put it back down. And because we're not fourth dimensional beings, we don't understand what space and time could be like in the fourth dimension. So space and time, how we perceive it, might not exist how they perceive it. Hence why something could instantaneously jump from one point to another.
It would also, I mean, this is very much more technical than I thought we would be talking about poltergeist. But there's like these cases where I think we talked to Michaela Cook, and she had where she'd lost items like slippers or something, and she'd seen it literally materialize in front of her eyes, just literally come out of nowhere in front of her, and she witnessed that happen. And she can't find it. She's looking in one direction and just appear in front of her eyes. And that would explain the same sort of theory where they've picked it up, so to speak, and then put it back, and that's why you've just seen it appear from nowhere, because it's coming from a different part of time and space, really.
And the other thing as well, one of the first things that Keith Linder said happened to him when he first moved into the Bothell house was he had a pot plant, which lifted or levitated out and rotated. And in his book, he explains that scientists have found a way, and admittedly it's on a much smaller scale, scientists have found a way to basically levitate water droplets using sound waves.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen on YouTube where they've got like 5 water droplets in a stack, not touching each other, but they're all levitating due to sound waves. And he's like, what if a poltergeist is an incredibly powerful, multi-dimensional being that knows how to manipulate sound waves to make things levitate? And that's like the explanation for something that we understand in our dimension and in our world, that if potentially this more powerful being has a better grasp on and can just do things better, and that's how it can do these potentially like paranormal magical things, right?
Okay, question. If they are this powerful, why are they not everywhere? Why do they only affect certain people? Why do they only appear for a certain period of time, and then, like we say, it almost overnight just drops off?
Yeah. Well, Darren Ritson, the writer of the South Shield podcast, seems to think that I'm not sure where they come from, or as you say, why they're not everywhere, but he seems to think that they feed on fear, and that's why they try and go out of their way to scare people rather than harm people, because they feed on fear, and that's what keeps them energized, as well as electrical influence. So one of the common things around poltergeist is battery drain, and that could be because they're draining the batteries to basically charge themselves up to then go and do a massive spate of whatever they want to do, and then feed off the fear that they're creating from that.
It just seems a bit mad, like sort of when you talk about some poltergeist cases where they're sort of just doing random things to one person or one family. Like, it's kind of like, I mean, being naughty, I guess, is a way to describe it to that person. Why are they doing that rather than, if they could do anything like that, why are they sort of just doing it just to kind of mess with a certain person?
It comes back to how much we don't understand about them. Like, that side of things, no one really knows. And again, maybe they are like a manifestation of someone's subconscious and like the darker side of their human psyche that as a rational, moral human being you'd never really do, but if you've manifested the worst parts of you, that's why it's quite happy to do it. Another thing that comes up seemingly quite a lot is apparently they're pretty or they can seem pretty OCD. Like they'll get obsessed with certain items, and it'll be things like in the South Shields Poltergeist case, I believe they said there was like a little statue of a woman, and it would just keep appearing on the stairs. And it's that sort of thing. They'll do the same thing over and over again, or like stacking chairs or like cups very neatly and stuff like that. And there's this weird like OCD thing with them where they seem to get obsessed with something and they'll just keep doing the same thing with it rather than mess around in different ways. They'll always, which they do obviously, but there seems to be things they focus on and will just keep doing. Excuse me. And also things like, in terms of writing messages, like words are often misspelt in a very odd way, which again, if you're a multi-dimensional being, why would that be the case?
It fascinates me because we've obviously spoken to a few people about it, and it's just the way it ramps up. And I know it's about this fear thing and whatnot, but it ramps up from a knocking noise to like objects being thrown or missing, and then things moving. And in the case of Keith Linder, Bibles being set alight. And he's got like 666 written in oil on the walls of his house. And it's just like...
There's a theory that a lot of that stuff, like the whole Bible is getting burnt in 666, it's not necessarily aligned to a religion as such, but the poltergeist is doing those things because it knows that's what would get to people. You know what I mean? Like, to put this into context, I don't know if you guys are religious at all in that sense, but say, for instance,
I'd burn up when I walk into a church.
Yeah, what do you think happens to me?
Oh, mate. Say none of us are Christian, but if you then had something that you can't explain that's chucking shit around your house and moving stuff everywhere and hiding things, and then all of a sudden it like turns a cross upside down or writes 666 on a wall, you're immediately going to think like, my God, demons exist or something, right? And admittedly, none of us are Christian. The sad fact of it is we're from the Western world and it's ingrained into our psyches because it's all around us all the time, right? And I'm sure there's potentially reports of poltergeists in other countries that would maybe do the same thing in like a Hindu context if it was in India or something, you know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think it's because people believe, but people are Christians, but it's in our psyche, right?
Yeah, I suppose it is. It's like that Western belief, like you say, that if the cross and the sign of the devil's up there, people will assume it's that. So I was looking, and so talking about the psychokinesis and telekinesis, some people are also stating that reported poltergeist phenomena could be explained by the movement of underground water causing stress on houses. And this guy called, weirdly, Guy William Lambert, suggested that water turbulence could cause strange sounds or structural movement of the property, possibly causing the house to vibrate and move objects. Later researchers such as Alan Gould and Tony Cornell tested Lambert's hypothesis by placing specific objects in different rooms and subjecting the house to strong mechanical vibrations. They discovered that although the structure of the building had been damaged, only a few of the objects had moved a short distance. So they were assuming that water and movement of the property was going to cause the objects to move.
I don't want to sound like a cock, but that theory is pretty flawed because I'm pretty sure underground water can't text your phone from your husband's number saying I'm going to kill you tonight, or in Keith Linder's case where a radio of some sort basically played a section of Katy Perry's Dark Horse on repeat a weekend before it all fucking kicked off in his house. Like, I wouldn't have thought that underground water movements could do that sort of stuff.
No, but it was actually blamed. Underground water movements and underground train station was blamed for the Battersea Poltergeist and some of the noises that were heard there initially.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. The amount of investigations I've been on, to the point that me and Patsy now roll our eyes a little bit and go, "Told you so." The amount of investigations we've been on where we'll go there and there'll be some form of water source nearby, or there's a well underneath it, or there's running water, and it is fucking uncanny the amount of alleged haunted places that have some sort of water source near them. So I definitely think there's something in it, but I don't necessarily think that's to blame entirely for poltergeist activity.
It's interesting because we were talking about Skinwalker Ranch and some other haunted ranches, and they've all got water courses near them and rivers and such like. So,
yeah, I remember you saying on the podcast, and I was just like, it seems like 90% of haunted places have some sort of water source near them, like the Ancient Ram, where they rerouted the river, or 30 East Drive, which has allegedly got a well underneath it, or even a local pub to me, the Freak Arms, where they didn't think there was anything, and then someone in the village has got a deed to half of the well under the pub, and the landlady's going to me, but there isn't a well under the pub. And it's like, well, if there's a deed for it, it must have existed at some time. And shit like that, it's just like, what?
So, on the subject of poltergeist, as we're talking about, we have spoken to many people whereby UFOs have been linked to poltergeist activity as well, haven't we, Ash?
Mm.
So we spoke to we've spoken to many people, but we spoke to a guy called Michael, who seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth again, and he allegedly grew up with poltergeist activity, and is not the only UFO experiencer to have some kind of paranormal and poltergeist activity at a young age. So whether or not there's any kind of, or what are your thoughts, Ash? Do you think there is any kind of connection there?
I mean, it could be psychological. I think a lot of this stuff can be explained by psychological stuff. And if you do have some experience of some sort when you're younger, you probably just got more of an open mind to either see something and making it out to be something that it's not, or seeing like there's a light and believe it's more likely to be UFO than something normal, or because you are open to it, you can start experiencing it, and maybe you can attract whatever it is in because you are open to it and you're more susceptible to it. So that could explain why people have like ongoing experiences of all different types. But again, just sort of going back to the psychological side of it. I mean, obviously it's hard to drill down into each individual case. So as we're talking more general, but like you have mental conditions such as like schizophrenia, things like this, where you are become a different person for a period of time. If that different person is doing something in the house, then you then come back to your usual self and notice these things have happened. And you're the only one that's been in that house, and now something's happened in that house, but it was you, but you didn't realise it was you. You could start attributing that to sort of this type of activity.
What's also
That's a good shout, actually.
What's also interesting on the original point of UFO sightings relating to poltergeists, there's also a number of poltergeist reports that don't include UFO sightings, which in a way makes it even weirder, because if there was UFO sightings related to all of them, you kind of go, oh, okay, well, potentially it's related to something extraterrestrial, for want of a better term, right? But the fact there isn't just adds even more high strangeness and even more us not knowing what the hell is going on, because it's not much like every poltergeist case I guess, where there are similarities, but no two of them seem to be the same. There's stories about poltergeist cases in Brazil, I believe, where a poltergeist was allegedly set fire to some girl's clothes while she was at school. She'd her clothes spontaneously combusted, or manifesting, don't quote me on this, manifesting rusty nails in someone's mouth or something.
Nice.
And it's this weird thing where apparently I don't know how true this is, but the Brazilian version of the poltergeist is way more fucking violent or whatever.
They're all crazy down in South America.
Yeah, Brazil's a mental place.
I did want to go back quickly to what Ash was saying about this whole like split personality thing, and some kind of personality disorder, because that kind of does fit some of them, where you kind of, your brain actually switches off when you go to this other person. You don't know that the other person exists in you as such. So yeah, you could move stuff and go, you come back and you're just like, what? Where's that gone? And then you find it in some random place where your other personality is.
How quickly do you think you could be dipping in and out of personalities, though? Because
I don't know. There's a Netflix program, and the guy's got like 19 or something like that, and you can see him physically change on interview with police.
Because I'm just thinking there are reports in poltergeist cases where people have walked into a kitchen, all the cupboards are open, closed them, walked out for a matter of seconds, walked back in, and it's all open again. And you might be right that maybe that matter of seconds isn't a matter of seconds at all if they've got some sort of like split personality or schizophrenia or something. But
that doesn't cover off the family
corroborate evidence
affected.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I think if someone did have schizophrenia or a split personality, other people would be pretty clued up to it. Do you know what I mean? Much like you've just said, the guy with 19 personalities who you can physically see him changing. I would imagine it's quite obvious. Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
so Skinwalker Ranch, they experienced poltergeist activity. So they moved in. They wondered why there was locks on the inside and outside of cupboards. And then one day, the lady came in with the shopping, put the shopping away, went out, and then literally came straight back in, and everything was out back on the table, and all the cupboards were open. And now, I don't know how that works. I don't know.
Maybe that's not even a poltergeist. That's like a micro time slip.
Could be a time slip.
Imagine.
Could be a time slip. It could be, but it just seems weird that everything, like Ash said, it's quite mischievous. Certainly at the beginning, it's quite mischievous. But so it might be a good time to start talking about the specific case, which is
I was going to raise
Enfield
this and say the issue with a lot of poltergeist cases is a lot of them include some level of fuckery, much like the Enfield poltergeist case, where they like that picture where the girl's like, "Oh, I'm levitating," where she's blatantly jumped off the bed. It's like,
that's bullshit. Yeah,
it is, absolutely. And the one thing, admittedly, I don't know a great deal about the Enfield case, but the one thing that compels me most about that is the little girl speaking in the older gent's language, and to the point doing it with a mouthful of water, and for allegedly hours on end, and also the vocabulary being something that was potentially far beyond how old was she at the time, Greg? Like 11 or something?
I think she was just coming up 12, about 12, 11, 12.
The vocabulary and like the localized knowledge being far beyond what she would probably know at that age. And that, as I say, that for me is the most compelling point of that case, because that is very weird.
Yeah, if you watch some of the documentaries, there is a great documentary on YouTube about it. like a BBC documentary that was done at the time, and it is one of the scariest things to watch when this girl is talking. This old man's talking through her, and she was saying it feels like she's talking to the camera, saying that she can. It's like he's just behind her, talking through her, and they're saying that because she was talking for hours and hours, for days and days, that there's no way your voice could cope with that kind of vibrational activity for that length of time. And there's loads of. They go, "Who are you?" And
I'm Bill,
he's going.
and all
He
that
goes,
sort of
"I'm Bill."
stuff.
He
Yeah,
goes, "I'm dead." And then he
yeah,
goes, "So what
yeah,
are you?" And he goes, "I'm a ghost. I'm a
yeah.
ghost." And it's
And
just
when
like, what
they
the
ask they
fuck?
ask him something, what do you want? And
Mm.
admittedly, it might be a great opportunity for a 12-year-old girl to swear and get away with it. But when they say to him, "What
Yeah,
do you want?" He's like, "Fuck off," and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff. And it's like
yeah.
just gets really aggressive to them as well. It's so weird.
Janet is the girl's name. So yeah, it all started with this family experiencing some knocking noises and whatnot, and then escalated that the girls. It sounded like the girls. There was Janet and her sister sharing a bedroom, and it sounded like they were up and about late. And the mum would come in and say, "It's time, like it's bedtime," and they watched this chest of drawers move across the bedroom. So the mum pushes it back, and it comes out again. She's trying to push it, and it's just not moving again. And I mean, even at that point, that'd be the end of my journey in the house. But
Yeah,
they go next door
but
and
they're
get
person
this.
centric, not place centric, Greg. So there's no getting away
Yeah,
from it, mate.
yeah. And it actually happened that Janet went to get checked out, and things started happening elsewhere. So yeah, that's definitely true. If you've watched The Conjuring 2, that's based on the Enfield Poltergeist.
Surely that's
But
greatly exaggerated, though, right? Because it's a Hollywood
yeah,
movie.
massively. Yeah. And it's based around Ed and Lorraine Warren and their
Let's not talk
investigations into it.
let's not
But
talk about Ed and Lorraine. But
apparently they turned up at the house at the time and were told to go away.
yeah, they were.
Obviously, it's
I
not like that in
believe
the film.
no, that like the film sort of shows that they're fully invested in the investigation, and like
Yeah,
it was either they were told to go away or they were there for like an hour and sort of turned up and
yeah,
went, "Yeah, looks like a demon," and fucked off again, as they usually did with a lot of things.
yeah, yeah. It's, but it is this. I think it's because the Enfield Poltergeist, because it's British, it happens in a house. And if you Google Enfield Poltergeist, the house is just a normal sort of council house, typical looking house. It's in Green Street in Enfield in London. So Janet was 11 actually. So apologies, you were right. And their sister is Margaret, 13. They didn't know where to go with these happenings, so they went to the papers, and it became a big thing. And when they did, they had this guy called Maurice Grosse and a writer called Guy Lyon Playfair, and
The
they were
legendary Guy Playfair, right? Because he was
exactly.
involved in loads of stuff.
Yeah, he's a very prolific writer on the paranormal as well, and wrote a book about it called "This House is Haunted," and it's almost like a diary of every event that took place over the course of their investigation.
Yeah, as I've heard the name from reading like various other uh, Poltergeist books, and I know he's pretty revered as like one of the go-to guys, along with I can't remember. He had like a counterpart as well, whose name I can't remember at the moment. But I don't believe it was Maurice Grosse.
So Maurice Grosse, so he worked for the Society for Psychical Research, and he was sent there to investigate these issues. And so he spent a lot of time with the family, and he became a bit of like a father figure for Janet and Margaret because their father wasn't in the picture. which some people believe is the reason why it went on for so long, because Janet and Margaret were concocting things to happen that kept him around, because he was like a father figure to them.
Yeah, which I mean, they admitted later on, right, that they were responsible for some of
they
the
did
activity.
they did. So, which is weird, and you could write off the whole experience of the poltergeist activity by saying, well, actually, they made it all up because they said they did. But police witnessed like chairs moving across the room. There's police reports, and there's a police woman who's been on camera saying that she saw this thing move across the floor, and that obviously couldn't have happened. Kids couldn't have just done that and faked it.
Yeah.
But Maurice Grosse caught the girls because he left a tape recorder in their room recording, and they caught them saying about how they were going to fake some of the stuff. So he called them out on it, and they did say that they were essentially, they did fake some of it. But like you say, they were able to capture recordings of Janet with water in her mouth, and they taped over her mouth.
Paramount to fucking child abuse, really.
Yeah. And still, she was able to talk. It was the 70s. Anything went in the 70s. There's no such thing as health and safety back then.
A lot worse things to have in your mouth in the 70s as a child, weren't there? So,
we're not going anywhere near Jim Savile tonight. Operation U Tree it is nowadays.
Yeah.
They're all tumbling. Anyway, so eventually, though, like with all poltergeist activity, it did sort of drop off, and the haunting stopped, and the Janet and everybody went on to lead the rest of their lives, and they don't really talk about it a lot, which is obviously something I probably wouldn't want to talk about, because they've only ever been known
as like the Poltergeist girls. I think they were on an episode of This Morning on like some anniversary of it, and they got. Did they ever go back to the house, or they met someone? No, that was it.
Yeah,
they met Lorraine Warren while The Conjuring 2 was coming out, and they were just like, "Oh, it's so good to see her. She was so good to us, this, that, and the other. She was one of the only people that believed us." And it was like, contrary to what you hear about, that she turned up for about 2 seconds and went, "Yeah, it's demons. See you later."
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah. I mean, for the kind of stuff where we know the girls faked some of it, there's a lot of witnesses to seeing stuff happen that obviously they knew that the girls hadn't done it, and they were still witness to it. So I think that just, I mean, they were kids and probably did play up a bit. They get any attention. Let's try and get a bit more attention. But stuff was happening, but they did try and play it a bit more like kids do to get excitable and maybe do something to just get that more attention. So, yeah, some of it's faked, but the amount of stuff that was seen that couldn't be faked by independent people is, it's a great case.
I think one of the other interesting ones, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, is the Battersea Poltergeist, which I think I'm right in saying they nicknamed the poltergeist Donald, and there was horrendous things happening over the period of time that the poltergeist infestation was happening. And then one day he just sort of left a note to them saying something like, "See ya," or "Me go now," or something. And then the mother of the family's turning around to the dad and the daughter going, "Oh, I really miss Donald. I wish he'd come back." And they're going, like, "Fuck you do. Like, it's been horrendous for the past 6 months or whatever."
Yeah, it's also with the Battersea Poltergeist, she went to work, and she worked as a seamstress, and things were still happening while she was at work. So scissors were floating across the room, and people were freaking out while she's at work. So, like you say, it is a a person-centric kind of experience.
And that was a girl as well, wasn't it? A teenage girl.
And one of the other weird things as well is, like, I think I remember someone saying about, like, there's a lot more poltergeist cases than you, like, people have this misconception that they're quite rare, and then someone else was like, there's a lot more than you actually realise that just never really get picked up, like the Enfield poltergeist or something. I'm sure there's a short on Vimeo about the Coventry poltergeist, which is made by Bill Bungay, the current owner of 30 East Drive, and he made like a short video interviewing a woman about they call it the Coventry poltergeist beforehand. And when I was doing some research, I googled it, and apparently back in, I think it was 70s, there was like 2 separate poltergeist incidents in Swindon, which you'd never hear of unless, like, I think I literally searched for Swindon poltergeist or something. And apparently loads of them that just never really hit people's radars.
Yeah, I think, like you say, I think some people are scared of even announcing that they've got that kind of activity in their house, because the Battersea poltergeist, it was 2 streets away, and there was another poltergeist as well. So around the same time. So there are reports in Whitney. There are reports on one of the particular housing estates that there is that sort of activity. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's, you can't really verify unless you can get in there and witness it for yourself, can you? And then, like, I can't remember what I was going to say. Great content that I've totally forgotten what I was about to say mid-sentence, but...
Well, that's probably a good... I'll end
I was going to say something, actually, a little
I can quote Keith Linder's book a lot more if you want, but...
I was going to say, when you talk about sort of, it starts off as little bits and then it sort of increases in dramatic stuff. And is that when Mike, you mentioned before about manifestations and stuff like this and being able to manifest like nails in the mouth and stuff. As more things are happening, are these people manifesting more things to happen? So it's sort of like a tumbling effect where things are getting bigger because they're allowing it to, more things happen, they're manifesting it, and that's why it seems to increase.
You might be right that if it feeds off of fear, the more people are scared, the more it plays into their subconscious, and maybe their subconscious starts to make things happen. Or, like you said before, due to the psychology of the situation, you start to think the more things are related to the poltergeist than they actually are, sort of thing. I mean, you see this in the paranormal quite a lot with people who are born believers and everything's paranormal to them, sort of thing. So maybe there is an element of that. I kind of remember what I was going to say now. I read a book called Poltergeist. I can't remember who it's written by, but he went out to, I want to say it was Romania and Eastern Europe, and he made a pretty compelling argument that in Eastern Europe, the concept of the ghost or poltergeist doesn't really exist. They're more akin to sort of Dracula and vampires as their supernatural entity. And apparently it was like that for quite a while. And then I believe he said in Bulgaria, there's a folklore belief in like a form of vampire that is invisible and very mischievous. And it was basically a poltergeist, but because the concept of poltergeist didn't exist over there, it was like a form of supernatural vampire, essentially. And it was just like, that's really fucking interesting that because the concept of it didn't exist to them, they just attributed it to something else that they are more familiar with. And I think you could argue that for a lot of sort of areas in the world. I know that or I believe that, I shouldn't say I know, I believe that in the Muslim faith there's the concept of like the jinn, and the jinn are sort of multi-dimensional entities that we can't interact with, but they can interact with us, and they can be quite mischievous and fuck around with people and stuff. And again, it's like that concept, and for some people they're seen as demons, and I do kind of wonder how much in the Christian faith people go, oh, demons is potentially what we now call a poltergeist. And I don't necessarily believe in demons, but the poltergeist is the one thing that sort of makes me go, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
But I'm more akin to believe that it's like a multi-dimensional being of some sort that we just don't understand. It not necessarily a ghost in the sense that it's not the spirit of a dead person, if you believe that is what ghosts are.
I think because it doesn't seem to be, or the Enfield poltergeist does, because the guy says that the spirit says about how he died of a brain hemorrhage in the chair in the living room, and that the previous owner's son said that's how his dad died in the chair of a brain hemorrhage. But it would appear to me that poltergeists don't appear to be like an attachment of a dead person. They're just a thing. And I think that's even more worrying because you don't know what it is.
There's a really, I like anyone listening to this, I wholeheartedly implore you to go out and get Keith Linder's third book, The Night Side of Physics, which the way he explains stuff is amazing. But he, and whether you believe Keith Linder or not is your prerogative, because I know certain people don't. But he, once he started having activity happen, he set up a bunch of cameras around his house, and it would appear that the poltergeist was aware of where the cameras were pointing, because it wouldn't create activity on camera, all to the point that it would turn them to face a wall while it trashed his house. Again, could just be him, but who knows. But he then got two very well-regarded investigators in a gent called Steve Mera, who came and investigated it, and I believe caught an EVP, which he believes to be the poltergeist, going, it's a camera, which shows like some level of intelligence, that it knows what a camera is and it knows that they're pointing a camera. And there was all sorts of stuff like that. And there was an EVP, I think he said that he seemed to think it was like there was a student and a master relationship going on. There was potentially two poltergeists, and it was like a training regime for something like that. He explains it a lot better than I do, because obviously he experienced it, but some of the stuff that he had happen to him is pretty insane.
Wow.
Cool.
I'll have to check that out, because I didn't. If there is some kind of like training regime going on between ghosts or poltergeists, whatever they may be, that's mental and quite terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I'd say he claims that he caught an EVP that sounded like it was two of them talking to each other about like, are we going to do it tonight? Yeah, let's get him, or something like that. And it was just like, what?
That would be scary.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point to wrap up this episode of the Round Table. That's definitely not exactly how I envisaged the episode would go, but I've really enjoyed talking about poltergeists. It is one of my favourite topics.
We started off quite technical and scientific and ended up quite spiritual. So that was
we did.
Good.
Yeah. So thanks for joining in us, Mike. Thanks again to Ash. And then, so the next one will be at some point in the future, probably monthly. We'll put these out, and we'll have a chat again, or we'll get some other guests on to join us and have a bit of a group discussion. I think that'll be really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sounds great.
See you later.